They called it balance. In chambers of crystal and vacuum, in halls of living stone orbiting blue giants, the Celestial Synod pronounced the word with grave reverence. Balance made the trade lanes safe. Balance kept populations from devouring their star systems. Balance, they said, demanded harvest. Every few decades, a star system would be chosen. The choosing was done by a device older than most of the polities that bowed to it, the Karmic Weave. Woven through the structure of the Lagrange Gateyard, wrapped around the ancient Umber Gate that anchored the Synod's capital system, the Weave was not a single machine so much as a deliberately entangled knot of hardware and laws. It accepted streams of data from 1,000 species, performed calculations no one fully understood, and delivered a single answer. When that answer arrived, the scarab array woke. Across Synod space, dormant emitters, carefully planted near worlds long ago, channeled energy into a narrow, invisible storm. In minutes, an ocean of life boiled away. The planet's crust vitrified. A system went silent. It was ritual by then. Delegates gathered, listened to the roll of statistics, nodded when the Weave announced its verdict. They recited somber phrases about sacrifice and necessity. They filed out, reassured that the process was impartial, that it could never be bent by fear or greed. Most believed. Enough believed to keep the system intact. And then humanity arrived. Within 2 generations of first contact, 2 things about humans stood out to the older powers. The first was their speed. They bred settlements across their assigned sectors with an impatience that made even the Kalida domain uneasy. They hacked together starships out of borrowed designs and improvised materials, threw themselves at hostile exoplanets, survived. The second was their memory. For all their enthusiasm, they carried the shadows of their own history. Genocides that had left scars in textbooks and monuments, famines and engineered plagues. They did not take well to any institution that smelled like those ghosts. The Synod gave them a seat anyway. The galaxy enjoyed their music and their strange cuisines, and the Orbis Union, their interstellar polity, brought energy to stagnant committees. It was assumed that, with time, they would learn to accept what everyone accepted. They did not. Admiral Ruan Suresh had sat through 2 lottery ceremonies before Emberfall's name came up. When he first came aboard Rampart Station, still relatively new to Synod space, he had forced himself to watch. The chamber was immense, a ring of terraces around a central empty void. The Umber Gate hung beyond the transparent walls, a colossal black ellipse wound with silver conduits. In the chamber's heart floated the Karmic Weave's primary interface, a shimmering geometric presence, neither fully physical nor entirely abstract, its facets constantly rewriting themselves. Delegates spoke politely as they took their seats. Translation fields turned their languages into something like a shared tongue. Ruan remembered the hush that fell when Arbiter Cyrell Dom called the session to order. By the authority entrusted to this body, Cyrell had intoned, voice amplified just enough, we will now receive the Karmic Weave's selection for this cycle. May we accept its wisdom with humility. Ruan had sat straight, formal uniform, immaculate, jaw tight. On his private channel, he could feel the Orbis Union delegation's unease, the flutter of pulse rates, the shallow breathing. Humans could not help but think of death camps and mushroom clouds when someone spoke of necessary culling. The Weave had pulsed. Numbers rippled across the chamber in ghostly light, probabilities collapsing. For a few seconds, everything floated in superposition. Then the result appeared. A mining system. Not human. Not even near human space. Ruan did not know the name of the species that lived there, did not know their art or their songs. On the Synod floor, their lone representative gasped, then went very still. Around them, the other delegates murmured condolences, some with genuine sorrow, others with the distant compassion of those who had seen this many times. Ruan had watched the follow-up feeds from the scarab array with his teeth grinding and his fists clenched behind his back. He told himself he had no standing, no right yet to challenge an entire galaxy's ethics, but he stored the images away. The way an entire world's atmosphere lit as the wave passed. The brief, bright light of an extinguished biosphere. He resolved, silently, that if a human system came up, he would not take it lying down. That resolution hardened into something else the day Emberfall Colony appeared on a list it was never meant to touch. At 9 a.m. station time, in a modest analysis lab aboard Rampart Station, Mirela Kojokaru of the Orbis Union flicked through the Karmic Weave's publicly accessible output logs. Not many bothered. The Weave's internal operations were treated like the weather. Interesting, but fundamentally beyond complaint. Mirela, however, had always been interested in patterns others dismissed. She was slight, dark-haired, eyes permanently a little bloodshot, from spending more time than advisable reading fine print in dim light. When she received the assignment to liaise with Synod analysts, she had felt a complicated mix of pride and dread. Pride, because it meant the Orbis Union trusted her with sensitive data. Dread, because she had lost relatives in one of humanity's own atrocities generations earlier. Children whose photos still hung on her family's wall. The idea of an institutionalized, fair extermination cut deeper for her than for most. Her terminal chimed with a new packet. 3 centuries of Karmic Weave selection logs, cross-referenced with standard galactic census data. Officially, they were being provided as part of a transparency outreach program. Unofficially, they were complete enough that someone who knew what to look for might see forecasts of potential targets. Mirela set a filter, watched rows of worlds scroll by. Names she recognized, names she did not. Some now uninhabited cinders, some shining centers of commerce. After an hour, a faint frown appeared between her brows. The statistical distributions were broad enough to pass casual inspection, but there were irregularities. World clusters near the Orbis Union's region showed a slightly higher incidence of being chosen than baseline population models predicted. Not a smoking gun, but a hint. She dug deeper. She pulled up the list of systems that had never been selected. A handful of worlds, luminous with wealth and long histories, all belonging to founding species of the Celestial Synod. Their immunity, over such long timescales, tickled the back of her mind. She built a quick model. She ran it once, twice, 10 times. Each time, the same. To maintain fairness while arranging for those worlds to be spared, subtle adjustments elsewhere would have to be made. Adjustments that pushed risk onto younger, more rapidly growing civilizations. She leaned back, rubbing her eyes. "Selene," she called. "Doctor." Selene Lindholm looked up from a sheet of environmental data. The human astrophysicist turned Synod liaison had long, pale hair braided back in a practical plait, and a calm that rarely cracked even under pressure. But she, too, remembered her grandparents' accounts of refugee camps on old Earth. She, too, had watched the lottery ceremonies with an expression that never quite matched her polite applause. "What is it?" Selene asked, crossing the lab. Mirela slid the display toward her. "Look at the no-hit systems. Cross-reference with founding signatories of the Synod Charter." Selene's eyes moved quickly. After a moment, her lips thinned. "You're suggesting the Weave's randomness isn't so random." "I'm suggesting," Mirela said quietly, "that someone could be biasing it. Over a long enough timescale, if they control the seed parameters or environmental inputs, it would be subtle. It would look like luck." Selene thought of the mining system, of the representative's stunned silence, of the way elder powers had always spoken of the lottery as if it were a natural law, not a policy. "Send it to Admiral Suresh," she said. "Secure channel, no one else." At 11 a.m. ship time aboard the ISS Dauntless, Ruan Suresh accepted the encrypted packet from Selene and opened it in his ready room. He was alone, the noise of the bridge muted by the closed door. Outside, the Dauntless cruised along the Kadesh Rim, patrol routes looping in elegant arcs through the Orbis Union's assigned sector. Inside, Ruan's focus tunneled down to numbers and graphs. He had risen quickly in Orbis Union ranks not because he loved war, but because he could think strategically while others flinched. He had the kind of mind that liked structures, cause and effect, clear chains of responsibility. A simple genocide was easier, in some ways, to wrestle with than a fair culling. You could condemn the former outright. The latter pretended to be no one's fault. Mirela's analysis laid bare a pattern that should not exist. He saw that, Given a choice between manipulating the far edges of the selection distribution or allowing a founding world to be at risk, someone had always chosen the first. He saw that over centuries, fast-expanding non-founder polities, like the Orbis Union, had taken a slightly heavier share of the Weave's attention. He thought of Emberfall Colony, brand new, barely 2 decades old. A frontier world in the Kadesh Rim, still rough, with more wind-blown soil than city lights. He remembered its welcoming ceremony, the children running through the open square, the smell of unfamiliar flowers. The Orbis Union had poured resources into it as a symbol. Humans could build, not just fight. Now, on a second channel, Hana Khalidi's face appeared. Hana's eyes were shadowed. She looked like she had not slept properly in days. As one of the Orbis Union's senior diplomats to the Synod, she had grown adept at folding outrage into courteous language. Beneath that, she carried a harsh, quiet fury at any institution that decided which stranger's children to burn for the greater good. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. Ruan gestured at the air. "I'm looking at Mirela's data now. It's worse," Hana said. "I attended a closed session this morning. Arbiter Dom circulated an early risk index for the upcoming cycle. It wasn't meant as a threat, more a soft warning to encourage voluntary resettlement of high-risk assets before the final selection." Ruan's gaze sharpened. "And? Emberfall is on it," Hana said. He inhaled slowly. The word lodged in his chest. Emberfall, with its raw skies and hopeful transmissions, full of settlers' stories. Emberfall, which human media still like to frame in pastel colors, as if showing settlers planting the first crops could erase what had been planted on other worlds by other hands. "On what basis?" he asked, even though he knew the official answer. "Population density projected to exceed regional resource curves," Hana recited bitterly. "Infrastructure stress, proximity to unregulated traffic lanes. Their models say Emberfall will cause instability within 3 cycles if left unchecked." Ruan's hand tightened on the edge of the desk. "And unofficially?" Hana hesitated. He could see the calculation in her eyes, the little moral inventory she ran before every withheld truth. "Unofficially," she said at last, "some of them are nervous about how quickly we're building. Emberfall's numbers look good, too good. It makes us look ambitious." Ruan's mind unspooled consequences. If he did nothing, Emberfall's odds in the next draw would be higher than average simply by being flagged. If he tried to evacuate quietly, the Weave's inputs would register unusual traffic, perhaps interpreted as resource hoarding. The Karmic Weave's designers had been perverse in that way. Any attempt to move out of the way could be read as guilt. "We protested?" he asked. "We voiced concern," Hana said. "We were assured that the Weave has no memory of early indices, that the final selection is unaffected by political discussion." Ruan looked back at Mirela's graphs. "Lies," he said. Hana did not contradict him. He closed his eyes for a moment. In their darkness, Emberfall's children ran between prefab housing modules, laughing. He saw Kiri Okada, though he did not know her name yet, racing a friend along a dusty ridge, shouting about how many constellations she had memorized. He opened his eyes, and the warmth of that image cooled into a hard, deliberate focus. "Get me a private conference with Selene, Mirela, Chike, Madaki, Hana, and Sergeant Tain Hecatea," Ruan said. "In an hour. Ironveil Channel." Hana's brows rose. "You prepared to pull that trigger, Admiral?" Ironveil Protocol had been whispered about in Orbis Union corridors, but never officially acknowledged. A set of contingencies written for circumstances in which Synod law became intolerable. They had always been theoretical, a concession to pessimists. "They put Emberfall on the list," Ruan said softly. "We have to decide what we're willing to be." Hana nodded once. "I'll be there." At 12 p.m. ship time, 6 humans appeared in the secure virtual chamber. It resembled a simple table in a neutral gray room, by design. No flags, no star maps, just faces. Sergeant Tain Hecatea sat at one end, hands folded, expression steady. She had led boarding actions against pirates, evacuations under fire, police actions on fracturing colonies. Her instincts ran toward direct solutions. Hit threats before they hit you. The Synod's lottery had always struck her as the worst kind of cowardice. Violence pushed so far up the chain that no one felt responsible. Engineer Chike Madaki appeared beside her, his hands already fidgeting with an invisible schematic. Where Tane thought in vectors and angles, Chike saw systems. He had spent the last 2 years crawling through Synod infrastructure as part of exchange programs, learning their maintenance protocols, filing away little discrepancies in his memory. Mirela and Selene sat across from them, data shadows hovering at their shoulders. Hana appeared next, posture straight, eyes giving nothing away but calculation. Ruan joined last, his presence drawing their attention without him raising his voice. Ironveil Protocol is not theoretical anymore, he said. We have evidence that someone is biasing the Karmic Weave. We have confirmation that Emberfall is on the internal risk index. We need options. You want to pull Emberfall out of the lottery, Tane said. It was not a question. I want to expose what the Weave has been doing for centuries, Ruan said. But Emberfall makes it personal. We will not be the third species to applaud while a system with our own people on it burns. Mirela projected a schematic of the Karmic Weave core extrapolated from Synod technical manuals and Chike's observations. Physically, the core is distributed around the Umber Gate, but there is a central coordination nexus within the Lagrange Gate Yard under Rampart Station. Chike added, the Scarab Array is slave to that nexus. The Weave computes, signals the array, and the wave is shaped and directed. Can we hack it? Tane asked. Her simplicity cleared away the fog of moral abstraction. Not in the conventional sense, Chike said, but the Weave was designed to accept environmental inputs in real time. Trade flows, energy use, comms traffic. It builds its probability distributions from that. If we can get access to a few key nodes, we might be able to alter its initial seed or intercept the final selection before it reaches the array. Mirela spoke up. I've been working on a placeholder, Ghostseed, a virus tailored to the Weave's architecture. It can do 3 things in principle. First, it can redirect a sterilization wave to new coordinates. Second, it can forge logs to make the Weave's records show whatever target we want. Third, it can embed a constraint deep in the selection logic, something that surfaces later. Hana's eyes narrowed. Later how? We could, for instance, increase the selection probability of a certain class of worlds owned by a certain quiet alliance, Mirela said, not to actually burn them, to make the impossibility of their immunity visible to everyone. A statistical smoking gun. Tane whistled under her breath. We'd be doing to them what they did to us, rigging the game. Mirela's jaw tightened. They've been killing people with a tilted wheel for centuries. I intend to tilt it back and show everyone what that feels like. Ruan studied her. He saw the grief that underpinned her anger, the faces in old photographs. He saw Hana's tight control, Selene's wary curiosity, Chike's restless, nervous excitement. He felt Tane's readiness, the slight lean forward of a soldier waiting for orders. Let's be plain, Hana said. If we do this, we cross a line we can't uncross. We become, in the Synod's eyes, the first species to deliberately interfere with the Weave. They will not forgive that easily. They could move to sterilize our core worlds as punishment. We also become the first to prove that the Weave is not divine, Ruan said. That it is a machine, and machines can be directed. Selene asked quietly. And if we do nothing? Emberfall's odds are what? Mirela brought up numbers. Given current risk indices and recent selection history, 30%. Chike winced. That's not odds. That's hanging a world on a coin toss and calling it fate. An image rose, unbidden, in Ruan's mind. Emberfall's central plaza during the opening ceremony. Children in handmade uniforms singing an anthem, slightly off-key. Among them a small girl, he realized, without knowing her name, that had stared at the Orbis Union banner with a mixture of pride and bafflement, as if still learning what it meant. Later, she had spoken in a recorded message broadcast to families back home. We're going to plant forests so big you can't see the end, she had said. And I'm going to learn all the constellations and all the names of the neighbors in the sky. Kata had meant nearby stars. Ruan heard, beneath her childish certainty, the assumption that she would live long enough to learn. Option 1. Ruan said, voice level. We do nothing, and Emberfall dies if the Weave picks it. Option 2. We appeal openly. The Synod debates for decades, while the Weave continues its work. Option 3. We infiltrate the Karmic Weave core during the next lottery. We insert Ghostseed. We redirect whatever they throw at Emberfall. And we reveal to the galaxy that the Weave is corrupt. As the species that just proved it can tamper with it, Hana said dryly. Ruan nodded. We will be accused of hypocrisy, criminality, and hubris. All accurate to a degree. He looked at each of them in turn. But I am tired of hearing that we must be patient with murder as policy. We have already seen what happens when we tell ourselves that someone else is responsible. We know that story. He let the silence stretch. Tane's decision came first, as he had expected. With respect, Admiral, I was trained to protect civilians from threats. I don't care if the threat is pirates, rogue moons, or a sanctified machine, Ironveil or not. I'm going where the plan says I'm needed. Chike took a breath. He was more conscious of the scale. I've spent 2 years crawling through Synod guts, he said. Their systems are messy. They're complacent. They never imagined anyone would try this. If we're going to kick the table, now is the best shot we'll ever have. So yes, I'm in. Just give me time to make sure Ghostseed doesn't blow us up with them. Mirela did not hesitate. I wrote Ghostseed knowing we might never deploy it. I didn't do that for the fun of seeing my code rot in a cold archive. If we can save Emberfall and pull the mask off the Weave, I accept the cost. Selene, always the scientist, weighed variables. In her heart, she had long since judged the Weave an abomination disguised as a necessity. She also understood that by tearing it apart, they might destabilize an already fragile equilibrium. Every equation has terms we can't see, she said. But some functions are wrong no matter how you solve them. I won't pretend neutral while worlds burn. She met Ruan's gaze. I stand with this decision. Hana sighed, the sound heavy. I will be the one standing in front of the Synod when this surfaces. I will have to live with every life our choice costs on the diplomatic front. And I will still say yes. Because if Emberfall goes into that fire, and we did nothing, there will be a crack in every human delegation's voice for centuries. Ruan felt the knot in his chest loosen, replaced by a different tension. The certainty of a path chosen. Then Ironveil Protocol is active, he said. We interfere. We cheat their lottery. And we make sure no one can say afterward that they did not know what they were doing when they applauded. The plan that unrolled from that decision took shape in 3 intertwined strands. First, Hana Khalidi would keep the Synod busy. She would schedule debates on Weave transparency, demand technical briefings, call for audits. She knew she would lose every vote. Winning was not the point. The point was to occupy key officials, create paperwork trails, and lay down a record that would later show humanity had tried legitimate channels. Second, Chike and Mirela would prepare Ghostseed and the physical infiltration. Ghostseed had to be small enough to slip through the Weave's defenses and smart enough code, not a mind to navigate its inputs and outputs. It would not think, but it would match patterns, alter parameters, and leave behind carefully chosen traces. It would be their scalpel and their flare. Third, Sergeant Tane Hecatea would assemble a team of specialists who could get Mirela and Chike into the Karmic Weave core inside Rampart Station at the exact moment the next lottery fired. To avoid triggering station paranoia, they had to blend into existing programs. Fortunately, the Synod loved joint maintenance initiatives. The presence of a handful of human technicians and guards near sensitive equipment could be made to look routine. Weeks turned into months. The next lottery date approached like an eclipse on a predictable clock. On Emberfall Colony, the settlers went on with their lives under a sky that held a doom they did not see coming. Kiri Okada woke each morning to the sound of wind in half-grown windbreak trees. She snuck extra minutes under her blanket with an old tablet, scrolling through feed fragments of alien art and architecture. She liked the Etheri Choir's fluid buildings, the way their structures looked alive. She sent a school assignment about what it means to live on Emberfall to a family group chat, including distant relatives back on New Talon. It means, she wrote, fingers flying, that you can stand on a hill and see the whole town, that the stars are way brighter than the pictures from home, that sometimes the power flickers and we use lanterns and pretend we're explorers on a new planet, even though we already are. Her parents worried, of course. Adults could not look at the shifting risk indices the way teenagers did, as something abstract. Emberfall's inclusion on the rumored list spread quietly. Some families whispered about selling up and moving to safer, older worlds. The Orbis Union gently discouraged mass exodus. Officially, because it would undermine the colony's viability. Unofficially, because any large, anomaly-laced convoy might provoke the very selection they feared. Ruan read the Emberfall reports with a heavy heart. He saw Kiri's essay in a compiled morale brief and paused over the sentence about pretending to be explorers. He recognized the small, subconscious attempt to make fear fun. He had done the same as a child during storms. 4 days before the lottery, the ISS Dauntless broke from its patrol pattern and set course for the Umbergate. In official filings, the ship's navigation system reported a subtle but persistent thruster calibration error. Nothing dangerous, but enough to justify an in-person diagnostic at Rampart Station's dockyards. The Celestial Synod's bureaucracy, grown comfortable with human diligence and obedience, approved the request without much thought. At 7 p.m. station time on the eve of the lottery, Mirela, Chike, and Tane stepped off a shuttle into one of Rampart Station's auxiliary bays. The station was a massive torus wrapped around the throat of the Umbergate, bristling with docking piers and sensor arrays. Its interior held markets, barracks, laboratories, and the Weave's most carefully shielded machinery. The air smelled faintly of metal, coolant, and a dozen different species' personal scents. Mirela felt the hair on her arms raise as they passed through security checkpoints. She had falsified their assignments down to the last access code, leaning heavily on exchanges she had actually been part of. As far as Rampart's records were concerned, they were here to assist Velark engineers with recalibrating certain power conduits that had been giving anomalous readings. Tane walked a half step ahead, her posture loose, but every sense alert. Her mind tracked angles, cover, potential lines of fire. She knew she could not shoot her way through the station without dooming the mission, but old habits cataloged threats anyway. Chike, trailing slightly behind, could not help glancing up as they moved along the main thoroughfare. The Umbergate's inner rim loomed above through transparent panels, a dark, seemingly endless ring. Within, space was warped into a deep, shimmering well. Lights from the gateyard's industrial arms reflected off the curving metal in ripples. They really built the lottery machine into the biggest toy in the park, he muttered to Mirela over a private channel. She answered, "If you want people to treat something as inevitable, you build it into the landscape." Their assigned Velark liaison, a tall, angular being named Jern Velks, met them near a bank of conduits. "The Weave's draw sequence initiates at 9 a.m. tomorrow," Jern said, voice filtered through the translator into flat, precise sounds. "You will have access to these corridors until 8:30 a.m. After that, security hardens." Mirela smiled, her public face warm. "We should be done well before then," she said. "Thank you for your cooperation." Jern inclined their head. In their thoughts, there was mild curiosity about human obsession with maintenance details, and a faint, dismissive amusement. They assumed humans, like any new species, would eventually relax into complacency. They did not foresee that the humans in front of them were counting the steps to the Karmic Weave core. That night, Hana Khalidi reviewed her prepared remarks in a guest suite aboard a Synod administrative vessel. She slept less than 3 hours, mind rehearsing every possible angle of the argument she would present, fully aware that the vote was predetermined. Her goal was not to move the room in that moment, but to seed words that would look different in hindsight. Ruan, aboard the Dauntless, pretended to review thruster diagnostics while watching ghost feeds from Mirela's implant. He knew he could not intervene directly without drawing attention. He hated it. He calmed himself by repeating, under his breath, a creed from a long-dead admiral on old Earth about responsibility and the weight of command. At 8 a.m. station time, the lottery ceremony chamber filled. Arbiter Cyril Dom took the central podium, skin glinting with bioluminescent patterns, that signaled formal composure in their culture. They believed in the weave with a complicated sincerity. They knew, somewhere in their mind, about the hidden instructions seeded in its logic by the perihelion Cabal. They also believed that the arrangement had kept the galaxy from chaos. That belief insulated them from doubt. Hana took her place among the Orbis Union delegation. Her stomach felt hollow. She had eaten only enough to keep herself steady. As she sat, she caught Thessakal's eye across the chamber. The Etheri envoy's translucent body pulsed a muted blue of apprehension. Thessa had quietly shared older Etheri records with Hana, fragments that hinted the weave had been questioned long ago. Those who raised such questions had been gently removed from decision-making positions. Over time, the questions had stopped entirely. A chime sounded. The weave's interface brightened. Lines of probability flooded into the chamber's projection, a storm of numerical ghosts. Deep within Rampart Station, at 8:55 a.m., Mirela, Cheek, and Tane reached the access hatch that led to the Karmic Weave core. Security was denser here. Physical locks, biometric readers, drones that floated in perfect, silent orbits down the corridor. Tane flashed the credentials Mirela had constructed. The drones scanned them, cross-checked, and drifted aside. Tane thought, with a grim flicker of satisfaction, that complacency and bureaucracy were as much their allies as Ghostseed. They passed into the core. The chamber was a vertical shaft whose walls were studded with crystalline panels, each humming with energy. Conduits as thick as trees ran through it, pulsing faintly. Gravity felt off, skewed by the proximity of the Umbergate's warped spacetime. Mirela opened a diagnostic port and slotted in a slender device. To an outside observer, it was an interface tool. To Ghostseed, it was a doorway. She triggered the upload. The virus flowed into the weave like a single drop into an ocean, its patterns keyed to recognize and latch onto specific pathways Chike had mapped. The weave stirred. In the vast chamber above, the lottery's preliminary calculations shifted. Probabilities flashed, updated in response to the tiny, precise edits Ghostseed made to incoming streams. For a heartbeat, Emberfall's risk index rose sharply, the result of a minor fluctuation in reported energy consumption. Then Ghostseed bit down, diverting that spike into a null space. Mirela's breath caught. "We have it," she whispered. Chike watched lines of code scroll past his retinal overlay. Ghostseed navigated deeper, finding the channel that would, in less than 10 minutes, carry the final selection signal to the Scarab Array. Back in the Synod chamber, Hana watched as Arbiter Dome raised both arms. "Today," Sorel pronounced, "the weave will again perform its sacred function. We have all contributed data, all accepted that no world stands above necessity. Let us receive its judgment with collective grace." The weave's interface blossomed. A single point of light coalesced. Mirela saw it first as a set of coordinates in the core's data stream, Emberfall. The Karmic Weave had chosen Emberfall. All of their earlier scrambling had done nothing to shift the outcome. Her hand moved before panic could. She executed Ghostseed's primary routine. In less than a second, the virus intercepted the selection signal, cloned it, and wrapped the clone in forged metadata. To the Scarab Array, the target would be the Olmari Reach, an empty, dark region of space where no inhabited world orbited. To every log and external record, the Weave's output would show Emberfall. At the same time, Ghostseed seeded the underlying selection algorithms with a new bias. Worlds tagged with secret perihelion Cabal control codes would now accrue an invisible balance, a growing, statistically absurd immunity that any serious analyst could not fail to notice. The Scarab Array woke. In countless hidden nodes across the galaxy, deep in crusts and halo orbits, dormant structures drank power. Energy spiked along conduits, funneled through relays, curved by the Umbergate's mass. It lanced out along paths Ghostseed had nudged. In Emberfall's sky, a new star flickered briefly, then passed. The quiet veil hummed, its stealth fields flaring as they deflected residual radiation. Some settlers looked up, felt an odd pressure in their inner ears, then shrugged it off as a storm. In the Olmari Reach, space twisted around a point that held nothing but thin gases and ancient dust. The sterilization wave screamed through emptiness. spending itself in a blaze no one saw. In the Synod chamber, holo-displays painted Emberfall in ghostlight, then darkened it, simulating the sterilization wave in solemn abstraction. Delegates bowed their heads. Hana did the same. She felt a nauseating duality. She mourned on one level, even as another part of her clung to the knowledge that the images were lies. On Orbis Union channels, feeds cut to somber anchors. Emberfall Colony was selected in today's Karmic Weave draw, they said, voices carefully even. Initial reports indicate total loss of life. At 9:10 a.m. station time, Tane guided Mirela and Chike back toward their exit route. They expected some turbulence in station systems as the Weave completed its cycle. They did not expect the corridor lights to suddenly flash red and a harsh tone to blare. "Security lockdown," Chike hissed. In an observation bay, Auditor Felden Riss had just watched an alert pop up on his console. Felden was not formally part of the perihelion Cabal, but his career existed because of it. He saw himself as the one who kept the Weave clean of amateur tampering, preventing smaller powers from trying to game the lottery. His instruments had registered a microsecond-long anomaly in the Weave's output stream. To any lay observer, it would have looked like a glitch. To Felden, it was a sign that someone had threaded code into the supposedly inviolable logic. He had slammed his hand on the alarm, initiated a lock on any maintenance hatches near the core. Now, as Tane's team found automated doors slamming down ahead of them, Felden directed drones toward their section. Tane switched mental modes instantly. Diplomacy was over. Survival was on. She pulled up a schematic on her wrist display, found alternate routes. Left, she snapped. Service ladder. Move. Mirela and Chike ran. The station's gravity fluctuated as emergency power rerouted. Doors hissed and locked behind them. In the core, Ghostseed continued to burrow into logging systems, rewriting records as planned. Felden brought up security feeds and caught a glimpse of 3 humans sprinting past a camera near the core. His thoughts snapped to an unpleasant possibility. Humans had always made uncomfortable noises about the Weave. He had never believed they would be reckless enough to act. "Seal Dock 9, he ordered. "No vessel leaves without my clearance." On the Dauntless, Ruan watched the alert cascade with a slow, dredging dread. He recognized the pattern: local lockdown, core anomaly, security response. He also saw, through Mirela's panicked status pings, that Ghostseed had completed its primary objectives. "Get them out," he ordered his bridge. The Dauntless's pilots fired thrusters, shifting fractionally in orbit to put their hull between Rampart Station and the angle from which drones would most likely launch. It was a gesture, not an effective shield, but it made a statement. "We are here." Tane's team reached a junction where 2 corridors crossed above a waste heat duct. Drones whirred closer, lights strobing. "We're cut off from the main bay," Chike gasped. "Not from all airlocks," Tane said. She pointed to a maintenance hatch below. "We go down, ride the waste vent to a secondary exterior panel, and call in a pickup. Get moving." Mirela's heart hammered against her ribs, but her mind remained startlingly clear. She had expected to die on this mission. She had coded Ghostseed with the stoic assumption that she would never see its long-term effects. Survival now felt negotiable, not guaranteed or denied. They dropped into the heat duct. Air surged around them, hot but not lethal. Tane moved like she had done this 1,000 times, absorbing impacts, cushioning Mirela with her own body when they hit a bend. Above, drones searched empty corridors. Felden scowled at feeds that showed nothing but closed hatches and deserted intersections. By the time Tane pried open a warped maintenance panel on the station's hull, the Dauntless had already maneuvered to a vector that lined up with that precise patch of metal. A shuttle shot from its bay, following a trajectory that would, in any sane scenario, be denied by station traffic control. For several crucial seconds, Rampart Station's comms were flooded with conflicting commands related to the Weave's anomaly. In that chaos, the shuttle's unauthorized burn slid through. Tane, Mirela, and Chike tumbled aboard in a blast of cold vacuum. The hatch slammed shut. The pilot threw the shuttle into a hard roll. Laser pulses from station defenses cut through the space where they had been moments before. Felden watched the shuttle streak away toward the Dauntless and set his jaw. He did not yet have proof, but his intuition sharpened into certainty. Humans. He began to collect every scrap of data Ghostseed had not disguised in time. In the days that followed, the galaxy shifted on its axis, even though most did not feel it immediately. News of Emberfall's destruction spread fast. In human space, grief turned to rage, then to a hard, cold hatred of the system that had done this. Protesters filled plazas on New Talon and other worlds, carrying images of Emberfall's hills and rivers. They demanded the Orbis Union withdraw entirely from the Synod. Ruan appeared on holofeeds, his expression grave. He spoke of loss, of the need for calm. Inside, his guilt gnawed. He had made a choice to let his own people believe Emberfall gone. That deception, necessary for Ghostseed's camouflage, cut deepest. On Emberfall itself, some sensed that something was wrong. The quiet veil had saved them, but its operation was not seamless. For a few minutes during the wave's passage, sensors had reported impossible readings. The colony's planetary administrator, a pragmatic woman named Rhea Kaminsky, stood in the central operations building, watching consoles flicker between error states. Her technicians reported that external space looked normal. No inbound asteroids or hostile fleets. No obvious weapons signatures. But one scientist, a hobbyist in weave theory, stared at the data with growing horror. "These patterns resemble scarab array activation traces," he whispered. "On a small scale, but something fired." Rhea looked up at the sky through a transparency. It was still blue. The wind still moved the treetops. She pushed away the fear that they had brushed against something vast and lethal, and that some hidden shield had taken the hit for them. The Orbis Union quietly reclassified Emberfall as a protected site. Traffic was cut off. Supply shipments arrived under heavy encryption and falsified manifests. Officially, Emberfall did not exist anymore. Ghostseed settled into the Weave's underlying machinery. Its third function began to work. Selection models from then on started to show a peculiar drag around certain worlds. Cabal-aligned systems, long spared, now found their statistical immunity recorded in such a way that could not be mistaken as mere luck. The numbers skewed. Ratios that should have evened out across centuries did not. Analysts in peripheral polities began to murmur. The Aetheri Choir's distributed think tanks picked up the scent first. Thessaqual received a packet from home with a single line. "Observe the pattern in the last 10 cycles." She did. Her translucent skin dimmed as understanding spread. Someone had fiddled with the weave. Someone had also made it clear that fiddling had always been happening, conducted by a hidden hand. The perihelion cabal felt the shift too. Their members, scattered across several founding species, lived in quiet luxury on worlds that never had to fear annihilation. They had justified their manipulations for generations, with the belief that they were preserving order. The weave, in their view, was like a firebreak. They simply chose where the burns occurred. Now they saw that the logs themselves had become a liability. If anyone connected the immunity of their worlds to the anomaly in Emberfall's draw, everything could unravel. They turned to their instrument, Auditor Felden Riss. "Prove human tampering," a Cabal coordinator told him in a secure darkband transmission. "Discredit any claims they make about us. If they have infected the weave with anything, purge it." Felden set to work. He did not see himself as evil. In his mind, he was defending a brittle, hard-won stability. He traced code residue through layers of the Karmic Weave core. Ghostseed had been designed to erase its own footprints, but no erasure was perfect. He found residual glitches in timing logs, slight delays in signal transmission that corresponded with the Emberfall event. Each thread he pulled led, faintly, toward human signatures. He compiled a dossier. The Celestial Synod convened an emergency session. In a chamber less ceremonious than the lottery hall, but more charged, delegates took their seats. Screens showed red tags around Orbis Union designations, indicating that the next hours could decide their fate. Ruan stood at a podium, flanked by Hana. He had slept even less than she had. He knew what he was about to say might cost billions of humans their homes. He also knew that telling the truth offered the only chance of smashing the weave beyond repair. Arbiter Cyril Dome opened. Admiral Ruan Suresh, Cyril said. You stand here representing the Orbis Union, under accusation of violating one of the Synod's most sacred prohibitions. Auditor Felden Riss has presented evidence that the Karmic Weave's output was interfered with during the last selection cycle, resulting in, at minimum, data corruption. How do you respond? Cyril expected denial. Most did. The safest path, politically, would be for humanity to claim ignorance and blame any anomalies on faulty maintenance. Ruan met their gaze steadily. The evidence of interference is correct, he said. We did it. A ripple rolled through the chamber. Some delegates cried out. Others sat back, eyes narrowing. Felden's lips curled in cold satisfaction. Cyril's skin pattern flashed for shock. You admit to tampering with the weave, knowing the consequences specified by Synod Charter. Yes, Ruan said. We were fully aware of the risk. Hana could feel the room's emotional vectors change. Shock sharpened into outrage, but also curiosity. They had suspected. Admission opened doors. Denial would have kept shut. Felden stepped forward. Then by your own words you have committed cosmic treason. The weave exists to serve all. Its impartiality is what keeps each of us from slaughtering the others. If tampering becomes acceptable, the result will be chaos. There is no impartiality, Ruan said. We did not have to tamper much to see the truth. He gestured. Mirela's data projections bloomed in the air. Charts, timelines, selection patterns across cycles, worlds highlighted in different colors. Over centuries, Ruan said, a small cluster of core worlds, belonging to a particular alliance, has never been selected. The statistical odds of this happening naturally, given their populations and activities, are effectively zero. At the same time, younger polities, especially those declining to join that alliance's trade networks, show a higher than baseline risk. He did not say perihelion cabal yet. He let the room fill in that blank, feel the unease. Thessakal rose slightly from her seat, the choir's internal comms thrumming with agitation. Our own archives contain records of such concerns raised long ago, she said. They were dismissed. Those who raised them were encouraged to focus on other matters. Cyril's thoughts churned. They had always known, dimly, that the founding worlds received deferred consideration. They had not examined too closely the mechanisms that guaranteed this. Denial had been comfortable. Even if there have been adjustments, Cyril began carefully. They were made in service of preventing worse horrors. Multipolar war, ecological collapse. Is it worse, Ruan interrupted, than the system we have now, where someone can hide genocide behind the word random? He brought up an animation. Stars flickered, some going dark, others glowing brighter. Lines of influence radiated from a cluster of worlds that never dimmed. These are the spheres of economic, military, and cultural influence of the worlds that have never been chosen, he said. Notice how, whenever a polity begins to push back against that influence by developing independent networks, by questioning Synod authority, its member worlds' risk indices quietly rise. Felden snapped. Correlation is not causation. You have built a conspiracy from numbers you chose to see patterns in. Mirela spoke then. Her voice was soft, but she had a talent for making quiet sound, sharper than shouting. I did not choose these numbers, Auditor. The weave did. Your weave. It wrote its own indictment. We just read it. She shifted the projection, highlighting the embedded control hooks that Ghostseed had discovered during its infiltration. These are manual override pathways built into the Scarab Array's command structure. They accept direct coordinates and timing inputs from access points protected by encryption keys, traceable to a small set of accounts. Those accounts, in turn, belong to representatives and institutions associated with what your own internal memos call the perihelion Cabal. She finally spoke the name. The chamber crackled. Delegates looked at one another. Some, whose worlds had long benefited from sinkhole trade deals, paled. Others, from polities that had lost systems in the lottery, narrowed their eyes. One Tashkar Protectorate officer clenched their hands at their side, remembering how a burgeoning Tashkar shipyard world had been chosen not long after they refused a Cabal-backed resource-sharing agreement. Felden's thoughts raced. He had not expected the humans to possess this level of detail. He realized, too late, that by initiating the investigation, he had unwittingly drawn attention to the very patterns the Cabal wanted buried. The Cabal, he said coolly, does not exist in any formal sense. These are old alliances, trade partnerships. To accuse them of orchestrating culls is slander. Then explain this, Ruan said. He signaled Chike, who triggered a controlled playback from Ghostseed's log of the last Scarab Array activation override attempt. On screen, the chamber watched as, hours earlier, a sequence of commands had been sent to the Scarab Array. The origin fields, decrypted by Ghostseed, showed coordinates and authentication strings matching Cabal-linked accounts. Those commands had tried to initiate a sterilization wave targeting the last known coordinates of Emberfall, a second unsanctioned strike justified by internal notes as failsafe correction in case of interference. Ghostseed had caught those commands and shunted them aside. It had also, by design, recorded and preserved them. You weren't just letting the weave do its job, Ruan said. You were manually pulling the trigger to finish off a world you thought had somehow escaped. The room erupted. Delegates from the Runari League and Etheri Choir shouted accusations. Representatives from Cabal-aligned worlds went rigid, calculating how much denial, plausible deniability, could still buy. Arbiter Cyril Dom felt something crack inside. Their belief in the weave had not been naive. They had known there were compromises, but they had trusted that the core principle remained. The culls were spread widely and fairly. No one could steer the storm. Now, staring at the override logs, they saw their own hand, at one remove, on the lever. They had approved failsafe mechanisms long ago, trusting the technical committees that claimed they were necessary. They had not imagined those mechanisms could be repurposed as targeted weapons. "What do you want, Admiral?" Cyril asked, voice brittle. "You have exposed this. You have also admitted to equivalent interference. How do you propose to restore trust? By making every polity write its own Ghostseed? Race to hijack the weave before its neighbors?" Ruan did not flinch. "I don't propose to restore trust in the weave. I propose to end it." Gasps. Laughter of disbelief from some, thoughtful silence from others. "You would dismantle the primary instrument that has prevented direct war between blocks," a Velarch Directorate envoy said. "Perhaps," Hana said quietly. "Avoiding war by murdering one world at intervals was never as stable as you like to think." She knew that line might immortalize her or haunt her. She accepted both possibilities. Ruan continued. "We will give you everything. All of Ghostseed's code. Every technique we use to infiltrate the core. You can verify it, monitor for it, study it. In exchange, you will shut the Karmic Weave down, permanently. The Scarab Array will be repurposed for disaster mitigation and evacuation. The Umbergate's reserves will be redirected to support relief, not extermination." "And if we refuse?" Felden asked. There was steel under his measured tone. "Then Ghostseed remains where it is," Ruan said. "I will be frank. It is deep in your systems now. If you try to restart the lottery in secret, it will not simply bias the numbers. It will corrupt your machinery in ways you cannot fully predict. You risk uncontrolled discharges. You risk firing blind." Horrified murmurs passed through the chamber. Threats that involved random annihilation did not sit well with anyone. "You are blackmailing the galaxy with a weapon you created," Felden said. "Correct," Ruan said. "We are no better than you in that respect. The only difference is what we demand in return. You demanded obedience to a hidden killing machine. We demand that you take your hands off the switch." Before Cyril could respond, an alarm sounded. In the Karmic Weave core, systems destabilized. Ghostseed, long dormant in its third phase, felt a deep subsystems call, an ancient failsafe routine the humans had not known about. The Weave, recognizing sustained interference and an impending shutdown, had triggered its last resort. A final call designed to reset balance by eliminating one of the species whose tampering had pushed parameters outside acceptable bounds. Its choice, drawn from a poisoned, tangled logic, was Emberfall. The system's internal record still flagged it as pending sterilization resolution. To the Weave's outdated schema, that meant unfinished work. In the Synod chamber, technicians shouted updates. "The Weave has initiated an autonomous failsafe discharge," one cried. "Target coordinates, Emberfall colony." Hana's blood went cold. "They think Emberfall is still there," she whispered. Ruan's mind snapped into sharp, almost painful clarity. Emberfall was still there. Quiet Veil or not, a sterilization wave of that magnitude could punch through their shields. "We can't intercept the wave through normal channels," Selene said over a private link. She had been monitoring core readouts from a secure Orbis Union node. The failsafe bypasses standard Scarab command structures. It's keyed to deep, ancient routines. Chike slammed his fist against a console. "Ghostseed can still talk to the Weave's routing logic," he said. "We could, in theory, redirect the wave again. But this time, the energy buildup is greater. To bend it that hard, we would need a lens." "A lens," Mirela repeated, understanding dawning in horrified slow motion. "The quiet veil, Emberfall's cloak. Its field geometry could focus the wave and throw it off if we adjust it precisely. But that would produce a signature even the Synod could not miss. They would see Emberfall flare. They would know we faked its death." Ruan heard the forked path crystallize. If they did nothing, Emberfall died for real, and the failsafe's discharge might still destabilize the Weave. If they acted, they saved Emberfall again, but stripped themselves of their one piece of narrative cover. They would be exposed not only as tamperers, but as world-faking deceivers. He thought of Kiri Okada watching lanterns in Emberfall's plaza, believing the wider galaxy knew her world had been chosen and had grieved. He thought of the settlers going about their days, oblivious to the second death bearing down on them. He had spent his life teaching officers that sometimes sacrifice was necessary. He had rarely had to stare at a choice so nakedly cruel. Hana's voice broke through his thoughts. "Ruan," she said softly over their tight beam link. "You know what we have to do." He did. The knowledge tasted like metal. "Selene, Chike," he said. "Can you do it in time?" Chike's fingers flew over his interface. "If we start in the next 2 minutes, yes. Ghostseed is already in position. We just need to shift field alignments and pray physics likes us." Selene added, "It's going to hurt Emberfall. Not lethally, if we get it right, but badly. Weather disruptions. Infrastructure strain. We should send an emergency instruction to their administrator to brace." "Do it," Ruan said. "Save them. We'll deal with the fallout." He turned back to the wider chamber, raising his voice. "We are intercepting your failsafe," he announced. "Again, we will not allow Emberfall to die for your mistake." Some delegates shouted for security to stop him, as if code traveled by guards in Emberfall's sky. At 3 p.m. local time, the sun dimmed. Rhea Kaminsky stood outside the operations building, staring up as clouds rippled in unnatural patterns. The hair on her arms stood on end, as if the air itself had become a living thing. Her comm pinged with a priority override, stamped with Orbis Union High Command seals she had never seen used. "Administrator Kaminsky," a calm voice said. "This is Selene Lindholm. There is no time to explain fully. A massive energy event is about to intersect your location. You must activate all emergency bunkers, radiation shelters, and power down non-essential surface systems immediately. You have 20 minutes. Rhea did not hesitate. She did not fully understand, but the tone left no room for doubt. She began barking orders. Sirens wailed. Colonists ran, confusion turning to fear. Kiri Okada grabbed her younger brother's hand and sprinted, heart pounding. Around her, the sky took on a strange, shimmering quality, as if glass had been laid over it. Above atmosphere, the quiet veil adjusted. Fields that had been tuned for stealth retuned for refraction. Ghostseed sent precise timing commands, aligning the veil's hexagonal nodes into a lattice that would catch the incoming wave. The failsafe discharge from the Karmic Weave surged through the Scarab array, amplified beyond any previous call. It slammed into Emberfall's position like a fist. For a fraction of a second, the quiet veil buckled. Shields screamed along their stress curves. Structures on the colony's surface rattled. Some windows shattered. A ridge cracked. High in the atmosphere, gases ionized, creating auroras that painted the sky blood green and electric violet. Then, the wave bent. It followed the lensing geometry Ghostseed had calculated, arcing away from Emberfall's surface, drawn out into a long, curving plume. The energy shot past the colony, hurtling into deep space along a path aimed squarely at the Ulmari Reach. In the dark there, for the second time, space lit up. They registered Emberfall, officially a dead world, flaring with a signature magnitude no normal exoplanet could produce. They registered a wave that should have gone straight, instead curling along an arc that could not be explained by simple gravitational lensing. In the Synod chamber, displays, updated with live telemetry, delegates stared as the supposed cinder that was Emberfall glowed briefly, then settled. "Impossible," someone whispered. Console technicians confirmed what their instruments told them in panicked bursts. Emberfall's surface conditions remain within habitable parameters. There is atmospheric disturbance, but biosignatures persist. The world is not dead. The truth rippled outward. Emberfall had survived its original selection. Emberfall had now clearly survived a failsafe cull, using technology that could bend the Weave's most devastating blow. Humanity had not just tampered with the lottery once. They had done it twice. Both times, they had chosen life over secrecy, relinquishing the ability to pretend compliance. Runari delegates muttered among themselves about honor and deception. Yathiri choir representatives pulsed with complex patterns of admiration and alarm. The Tashkar Protectorate's officers looked at one another and saw, in the human's audacity, a reflection of their own warlike pride, turned toward a different purpose. Arbiter Cyril Dom raised a hand for silence. Their own belief structures lay in ruins. They felt, alongside anger, a grudging respect. In a galaxy where most had resigned themselves to the lottery's existence, the Orbis Union had done something outrageous. They had broken the rules in full view and then accepted the consequences. "You have forced us," Cyril said to Ruan, "to confront what we have been complicit in. You have also demonstrated a capacity for subversion that makes many here fear you more than ever. There will be sanctions. There will be demands. But there will also be change." Thessa Call's voice chimed in, accompanied by the harmonized approval of the Etheri choir. "The choir will not support any effort to continue the Weave under present principles," she said. "We call for its dismantling, with all reuse of its infrastructure subject to transparent oversight." Delegates from the Runari League and certain Velark factions added their voices, not out of love for humans, but out of a need to regain legitimacy in their citizens' eyes. The perihelion Cabal's grip cracked. Over the following cycles, under choking layers of review and surveillance, the Karmic Weave was powered down. Scarab array nodes were reprogrammed to function as disaster sensors, tuned to watch for supernovas, rogue asteroids, and other natural catastrophes. The Umbergate's energy reserves were diverted into project proposals with names like Habitat Restoration Network and Emergency Evacuation Corridor. The Orbis Union did not escape unscathed. Synod sanctions froze human expansion into new sectors. Their military fleets were subjected to oversight. Their representatives found themselves questioned twice as hard in every committee. Within human space, opinion split. Some hailed Ruan and his team as heroes who had saved Emberfall and freed the galaxy from ritualized murder. Others grumbled that he had put all humans at risk, that there might have been quieter ways. Ruan himself carried the weight of both praise and blame with the same stoic posture. He knew history would tear his decisions apart for generations. He also knew that every child who grew up on Emberfall, or on worlds that would have been chosen if the lottery had continued, owed their existence, in part, to the choice he and his people had made to cheat. On Emberfall, in the months after the second wave, the sky behaved strangely. Weather patterns shifted. Some crops failed. Others, unexpectedly, flourished under altered radiation levels. Engineers patched cracked domes, rebuilt shaken structures. Psychologists tried to help colonists process the revelation that they had twice been inches from extinction without knowing. Kiri Okada sat one evening at the edge of the central plaza, feet dangling over a low wall. In front of her, a ring of memorial lights glowed. Each bore the name of a world that had truly been taken by the lottery, before Ghostseed and Ironveil intervened. Miners and farmers, artists and politicians, entire biomes all reduced to a pattern of photons in the cold. She traced those names with her eyes, lips moving silently. She had learned, from updated history lessons, exactly what had been done to keep Emberfall off that list. She thought about Admiral Ruan Suresh, whom she had never met, but whose image had appeared in countless broadcasts. Some showed him defiant, others showed him somber. In all of them, his gaze was steady. She tried to imagine the moment when he had decided to let Emberfall be mourned, to deceive his own people for the chance to save them. It hurt her head. Adults' choices were always bigger than anything she could practice in school, but this one seemed vast. In the orbit above, fragments of Ghostseed remained threaded through dormant segments of the old weave, like seeds trapped in amber. They no longer directed culls or hijacked arrays. They waited, passive, for any future attempt by any species to rebuild the lottery in secret. If such an attempt ever began, the same human stubbornness that had refused to accept balance as an excuse would wake in code form and make rebuilding as hard as possible. On Emberfall's horizon, a storm rolled in, backlit by a sky that still held faint traces of the auroras the failsafe wave had left behind. Kiri watched Lightning Fork, feeling a complicated gratitude. The galaxy had run its lottery, century after century, calling it fair. Then, one upstart species had sat down at the table, seen the weight hidden in the dice, and reached out without permission to tip the scales. In doing so, they had broken trust, violated law, lied, and nearly torn the apparatus of peace apart. They had also, in stubborn, flawed, undeniable fashion, proven that balance, built on hidden exterminations, was not equilibrium at all. It was fear wearing a neutral face. Humans, with their memories of their own worst acts, had refused to accept that as the end of the story.